Hello, everyone, and welcome to Commander's Pod. Meet the cast. I'm Duncan.
I'm Sloan.
And I'm Jeff.
And we thank you for joining us today. We'd like to talk a little bit about things that don't do what you think they do. Today, specifically, we'd like to talk about responding during combat. When can you flash in your blockers? When can you modify the damage you're going to deal? Those type of things. Mm-hmm. So I think most people think, I can flash in a blocker during declare blocker step, right? Because I'm declaring my blockers. Mm-hmm. So
Correct.
in that step would be when it would be appropriate to bring a new one in.
Right.
Right. That is not actually how it works. And even I did not know this until, about a month ago. It had just never come up where somebody knew the actual rule. You cannot cast spells during the declare blockers. All you can do is declare blockers.
Right.
What you can cast a spell is right after the declare attackers before it moves to the declare blockers step. So you can cast flash, you can flash in. So you're still going to surprise somebody, you're still going to get your creature in, but you're just not doing it during the quote declare blockers step.
And the reason why that isn't an issue many times is because most of the time you're playing with your buddies, and so if you cast it in that wrong phase, we're more than likely just going to be like, just go backwards, cast it in the right phase, we're good to go. Let's move on.
Right. But no one had ever even said to me, oh, no, that's not when you do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever, and I was like, wait, and I had to really research. You cannot do anything during the declare steps except for what that step is. The only time you can react is before or after a step ends.
So, and I think one of the reasons why this is funny is because Magic actually has a card that breaks that rule. So, taking a look at Mirror Match, it's 4 to blue. It's an instant. It says cast Mirror Match only during the declare blocker step. So it actually tells you can cast this during that in order for it to work. So it actually breaks its own rule. And I think that might be where some of the confusion is, because this gives you the exemption.
So it doesn't exactly break the rule, right? So the difference would be in the difference between these two things. So you declare attackers, Johnny.
Correct.
All right. Then we say, okay, any response to declare attackers? No. Okay. Now, then you say, okay, Jeff, what are your blockers, right?
Moving to declare blocker step.
Right. Moving to declare
You would have
blockers.
to cast it right then.
Right then. That's
then.
the time. Right then. You cannot do it once Jeff has declared his blockers.
Correct. So it's just the wording on this is so particular, and I think that's where the trip up is when you're coming to the very intricate details of Magic and the web that they have weaved, as it were. It gets very convoluted in when you can and can't do things, and this is one of the reasons why that gets tripped up. Now, like Jeff said, ultimately, with playing with your friends and very casually, it's not going to be something that really matters. I don't think it's going to be world-ending or game-breaking. If you're at a tournament or something like that, making sure you're doing the stuff at the right times obviously is very important. So understanding how this works is something that's needed to be known when you're going into that kind of environment. But I think casually, for the most part, honestly, I don't think it changes anything. It doesn't, in my opinion.
So what happened is
casually.
We did run into an issue where it mattered, because the problem this causes is then you cause other people to then respond at a point they shouldn't be able to respond to.
That's true.
So you cause a cascade of effects. A lot of times there's not going to be much of a response, but they can counter your flashing in that creature, right? But technically you're not supposed to cast spells in the middle of a step.
And to give you an idea where that sort of becomes an issue is like if you cast a spell, someone has a redirect, but they don't have anything to direct it to. Someone else can cast a spell, allowing you to redirect that spell to that. So the spells that happen on the stack allow other things to happen. So because you're allowing the rule to be broken in this wrong phase, there are a lot of things that can happen. They're very unlikely to happen,
Right.
but they can.
Yeah.
Magic is can be very confusing.
Well, it is the most complicated game in the world.
Other than marriage.
So marriage is a game to you. I'm sure
and
your
I'm
wife
losing,
will love
I
it.
think.
We will let your wife know.
When my wife is winning, and I think that's probably the way it should be.
That's no
So,
comment.
but basically that's the problem. I didn't know that I was doing, and it's just because I had never thought about it, never really thought about how it works.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, until you brought this topic up for the podcast, I didn't even realize it was something that was an issue. I didn't even think of it because I just thought, oh, I'm just responding to this, and it's something that, like you mentioned previously, we kind of just quote unquote
took it for
learned.
granted.
Yeah, you took it for granted, kind of learned wrong, and no one really knew the right way until you come across one person who really knows what they're doing. They're like, yeah, no, that doesn't work that
which
way.
which is funny. Like when you're choosing to play Magic, choose better friends. Like that's a great role here too. Like you have friends that will go and figure stuff out for you if you don't want to do it. That's great.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. I use that a lot. I.e. this case.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I honestly would never have looked this up.
Yeah.
I'd be like,
100%.
But
Or
Duncan's been
listen
doing
to
more
this
tournaments,
podcast.
so he's
Yeah,
more
or
into
listen to
it.
this
Or
podcast.
listen to this podcast.
Yeah,
and
there
you
you
don't
go.
have to
Yeah.
get new friends.
Great self-plug. Well done.
I mean, you should
Duncan.
still get better friends.
We're trying, Jeff.
But,
Yeah.
but so that's just something that I felt might help other people. I learned from it.
Yeah.
It's not, like we said, going to matter in most cases, but just in those cases where it will, now you know how to do it correctly.
Right.
So I know that really aggravated the player that happened to when I did it out of order. So, Jeff, what aggravates you today?
What a transition, man.
Right?
Well done.
We're getting
Nice
so good at this.
transition.
It's absurd.
Yeah. So one of the things that aggravates me, we talked about it last podcast, when you let people share decks. So I loan people decks all the time. I have like probably 27 decks. I think Duncan has like, I'm not even going to say the number. It's ridiculous.
It's over 80.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. That's just too much. But I loan out decks a lot because I know the power level of them. And they range, but when you loan decks out, how you take care of those decks are really important when you're playing them, whether you loan a deck or not, because you got that person who reaches their finger out and taps your card, right? What's that card doing? What's this card doing? It even aggravates me when they tap their own cards because these things are worth a lot of money. You should not be tapping them.
This is premium cardboard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not my fault some of these cards are worth $100 or $25 or $50, but they are, so you should not be abusing them.
And I go, as I said before, to a lot of tournaments and a lot of conventions. So I play against people that I only play against one time.
Yeah.
Right.
There are people out there who have, because of bad experiences, will not play against a deck that is like, I gain control of your creature or something.
Oh,
They do
yeah.
not want to let out of their control. These cards are worth a lot of money, and
Yeah.
not everybody treats them with respect. So that I do get that. I think that's actually a common problem. There's other things too. Flipping decks, right? Sometimes they get really cool coins, but they are probably really heavy.
I feel like this segment's really targeted towards one of
No,
us.
this is great because that is exactly what happens. So Sloan, whom
Yeah.
I call Johnny,
Yep.
because I have known him since he was
A young tyke.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he plays one of those decks with this really big gold coin. And
Which, in my defense, Duncan got for me. So
Yes.
Duncan bought it for me
and
for
I
this deck.
cover up my cards when he flips that thing.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we were playing at my house on I have a glass table.
Yeah, I can't even flip
And
it.
I
have
was
to
like,
walk
you're
away.
100% not using that on my table.
Yeah, I have to walk away
Yeah.
from the table to flip it. But there's
Yeah.
other ways to flip coins too. But it's really cool because Duncan did buy me a really cool coin from Las Vegas. And he bought me a couple other cool coins. So I have a couple different ones that I go through. And one of our other friends got me it's a coin that looks like a dice. It has a 20 on one side, 1 on the other. So I use a couple different coins. But yeah, one of the other habits that I actually kind of picked up from some other players a while ago was, like you mentioned, people don't want people touching their stuff or tapping it or gain control decks. And so a lot of times I've gotten in the habit of, if I can, I say, hey, can I read your card? Can I look at it real quick? And I ask them first, because there are some people who
Just grab it.
Yeah, they'll just grab it. And like, again, with some newer players, they don't realize that they just grabbed a $350 card. Like,
Right.
they don't understand that they just grabbed a $300 land, or, you know, whatever the card may be. Even if it's only $50 still, like Duncan said, a high quality piece of cardboard for $50 is still $50. Like, you know,
Well, and there are things,
you
there
don't
are
want it to be
lands,
mishandled.
like basic forests, that are worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
They look like a basic forest. The
And-
ink's a little darker,
and-
like it's from a different set.
And that's important for those of us who collect. Like I collect, but all my collection is in decks. If I
Yeah.
want a card that I love, I'm going to buy the card and I'm going to build the deck for it.
Yeah.
Because I don't really like collecting cards that just sit around. I want to use them.
Yeah.
But I don't want you to tap them. So please be thoughtful when you're choosing how to take care of cards, even your own, honestly.
So I think that's a really good tip. And I think that's something that actually can aggravate a lot of people when that happens. So let's all be respectful and try and behave properly. You don't know how much stuff costs or how somebody feels about their card. So
Yeah, well, and speaking of expensive cards and decks and stuff like that and touching them, that kind of leads us into
what another great transition.
I know, we're
Holy
getting
cow.
so
We're
good.
like professionals here.
If only we didn't say anything.
Pat each other on the back.
yeah.
We're coming up to, I guess, the big topic for today, Duncan, which is the cost of playing Commander.
Yeah, and let's be honest, that cost keeps going up.
And it goes up in, I think, multiple different definitions of what we're talking about here. So whether it be the monetary cost that we're referring to for individual cards or the cost of specific sets and boosters, I think recently they just announced that just a booster pack for a new set coming out, I think, is going to start at like $15 to $20, which normally they were like $4 or $5 for a little booster pack before.
Well, I
And,
mean, that's
you know,
specific sets. The
Yeah,
general
some
price.
of the collectors.
The play boosters, the new play boosters have gone up because there's more cards in them than were
Yeah.
in the draft boosters.
Right.
So it has gone up a little bit, and they're fluctuating. We're not sure where it's going to sell, but it seems like right now there is an increase in the cost to buy a pack.
But this comes back to picking better friends again, I think, too. That's so important because you get in an arms race if you're not careful, and all of a sudden you just start buying more and more stuff. And you're
Right,
like, what
yeah.
has happened?
But even the boxes that people buy with all the boosters in them and stuff like that, they used to be. I remember when I used to go to some events and stuff, you could get a whole box for like 150, full of like, I think it was like 50 booster packs or something like that for like $150 or something. I think now they're up to like 200, usually 250.
well, again, it depends what you're talking about. Collector's boosters are definitely
right. But
up there.
even that, like they created a whole
play
new type of
boosters
booster
for this last set. My pre-order cost for a play booster was $150, and that's up about $20, $30 depending on where and how you buy them.
Well, and Magic has gotten better at, and I'm going to use the word better because they're a business.
Right.
They've gotten better at understanding the EV of these boxes. They protect themselves better. And so like the last set I bought a bunch of sets for Ixalan. The new Caverns of Ixalan.
Lost Caverns, yep.
I did not hit the EV anywhere close to what I used to.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a bad set. Now, Lord of the Rings, they went pretty hard on that. I think maybe you could have got your EV back on some of that.
Oh, I made way more.
They're starting to really get. You have to be careful what sets you buy. You really have to think about the investment, unless you just have frivolous money and then you can do whatever you want with it. But most don't.
So they've also started coming out with more premium sets, the sets that automatically cost more than a normal set.
Right.
But sometimes those have better EV.
Well, that's the idea. And by EV, you are saying
Electric vehicle.
yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Estimated value.
Estimated value, yes. So you're right. The estimated value can be much greater, but let's look at, say, Commander Masters. Commander Masters, for the most part, people were upset because they could not get their value out of those boxes.
But then Commander Legends was amazing.
Right. Before that, Commander Legends, Lord of the Rings was amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I bought the Lord of the Rings bundle, I think, for $60, and this was when the One Ring was still worth $50, and you automatically got one in the bundle. So I literally got $50 back. So I'm only 10 negative, and then by the time I opened all the packs and stuff like that, I think I got somewhere around like $100 to $120 worth of cards. Because, again, they came out with certain cards that they guaranteed were in there, and then I pulled some really good cards on top of it.
Now, with that said, even though I didn't get my EV on Last Caverns of Ixalan, because I bought a collector's booster, that's what really killed me. I still built out of that the tribal decks, a pirate from my 12-year-old, Jaden. I built merfolk for my 11-year-old Paxton, and then I built dinosaurs. So I didn't get the EV, but we have a great deal of fun with it.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is something to think about too.
That's the important thing about Magic, but we're trying to find out, like, is the price going to get too high with this trend, right? Is this going to get out of hand? Is it going to be priced out so this is a premium game and only people with a lot of money can play it?
I mean, I certainly hope not. I mean, because one of the fun things about, Magic and really any tabletop that you get to open packs with. So I know Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, even sports cards that people go and buy packs for.
Right.
One of the thrills of opening that $5 pack is pulling a $50 card or a $100 card out of it, and if they make it to the point of where now in order to pull that pack, open that pack, you have to spend $20 to get that pack or $15 to get that pack, and then the boost and it kind of loses its fun and enjoyment.
But we shouldn't forget. I think wasn't it a guy in Canada who opened one pack and pulled the 1/1 ring that.
That Post Malone ended up buying, which is now
for over $2 million.
So I think he was $2.5 million. He bought it.
I don't think the health of this game is bad at all. I think what it does is it comes down to the responsibility of the players.
Well, you say that, and yet just the year before, Magic came out with Magic 30.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, that was a set that very few people were happy with.
No, I wasn't either, and I don't want to be a homer, but because there are things Magic does wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this was a mistake.
Yeah.
They made a mistake.
Well, in my opinion, though, it was greed-based. That was a greed-based mistake, not a design-based mistake or a printing error.
Yeah.
That was a deliberate, let's see how much money we can grab out of this.
Which, it's true.
Yeah,
and it was a mistake, but they're a business.
Right. Jeff
they're
said
trying to
business.
make money.
They do need to make money in order to give us this game that we love. And so was it potentially greedy? Sure. Could they have done it better? Like, for example, with Lord of the Rings, they did a good job of making some high value cards. And they even came out with, I don't know what they're called, but basically they made it to where you got the 6 full art cards to make the whole portrait.
That was really cool.
And they came out with it, and it was like $50 for that. And I don't think those cards even equaled $50 or $40, whatever it was. But people loved it because it's like, oh, I get all the full art cards and I can literally frame them and make the picture.
Yeah, you're giving value.
So
whether it's
they gave
dollar
value, but they also made money off of it. And I think they can do it. They're smart enough to do it. Obviously, they've been around for long enough.
But there is room for people to be upset about it.
Sure.
We just need to, my opinion is just to keep it in perspective. If they keep doing that, Duncan.
Well, I mean, I think they kind of have a little bit. Commander Masters, going back to that, it wasn't the price that Magic 30 was, but for the cards that were in the set and the value of the cards in the set, the price was much higher than it should have been.
Yeah. It was almost like
I think they're trying to find that right level.
Yeah.
So I mean, they'll get there, and they're homing in. At least it's not. But I also want to point out, Sloan mentioned sports cards. We have not gotten to that level, but I don't know
where they print so many they're worthless.
Well, it's not that.
It's not even, because don't forget, with the advantage with sports cards is because there's rookie cards, they only make them for that rookie year essentially. So they will always hold their value. So someone who has a Michael Jordan rookie card from the early 90s when he started, like, that card will only ever go up in value. The one thing with Magic is whenever they do reprints, it automatically drops the value of all the previous prints, right?
It doesn't always, though.
I mean, for the most part, there's a reason why Black Lotus is still, the original Black Lotus is still hundreds of thousands of dollars if you can find one, because they've never reprinted Black Lotus except for, I think it's just the alpha and beta sets.
A lot of times, the cards bounce back their value. And a lot of times, if you look at the cards, the older versions of the cards are worth more than the newer ones.
Yeah.
Unless there's an art thing going on.
Right.
Sometimes there's a particular art that's more popular.
Another thing, though, that I think goes into cost and the analysis of what value is. Mm-hmm. It has become a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You get a collector's box, right? Or a collector's pack. And there are cards in there that have cool art, right?
Yes.
Yeah, special art.
Special art, and it's foil and it's fancy, and you think, oh, well, this is going to be worth more than the original
20
printing, and you look and it's not. It's worth less.
Yeah, Roaming Throne's a great example of that.
You know, so there's a lot of stuff that comes into that. They're talking about, which one is more popular. Maybe people like the other look better or whatever. But I think part of it is there's not real good solid numbers on how many printings there are of all these different things.
Right.
Right.
And I think the play boosters will help with this because they've eliminated one printing, right? The draft boosters are now,
Yes.
so there's less, you would hope, cards. They're trying to fulfill both orders, but there was a surplus on a lot of these sets. But I think
Yeah.
there was a lot of printings of these special quote unquote cards, so they weren't as special as they should have been, and that hurt their
Right.
value.
Yeah. When you're doing like these alternate art cards, and full art, I think is another big one that they started doing a lot, where it was like just for one set, they did full art, and then it got so popular that they started spitting them out with every single set. It, like you're saying, it kind of decreases the value of those
It's
other
not
ones.
special
Yeah,
anymore.
it's no longer special. And it's funny because you mentioned in a previous podcast that there's some lands like basic forests and that are worth like $8 each, even though all they are.
There's some worth way more than that.
Right, but a lot of that
Beta
started.
forests.
Yeah.
Like, well, but even so, like even more recently, the unhinged lands that they came out with a long time ago that were full art were like $10 a pop, and
But those are all dropping in price too because there's so many choices.
exactly, because now they started doing a bunch of full art for everything, so it loses its value. So that's one of the things I think where your tabletop trading card games, your Magic, your Pokemon, your Yu-Gi-Oh is a little bit different than sports cards because it's a little bit more unique with sport cards in regards to they can't really reprint rookie cards outside the rookie year because you would show the printing and it would be a little bit different. So there is a little bit of difference there.
Well,
but,
but what I was saying when I said they haven't gotten to that level yet, it's both a good and a bad. So football has this thing. Well, actually, all the sports do. You can buy a pack, quote unquote, of cards that is one single card that costs $400 sometimes, maybe more,
Really?
maybe $200. Depends on the set, depends on the printing. But they're all special in some way. They have scraps of jersey, or they're guaranteed
or
signature.
autographs.
They're guaranteed autograph.
Huh.
But it's still, you don't know if you're going to get your value. So they do like rookie sets, right? You may get a card that has an autograph and even a scrap of game used jersey, but it's for a player that maybe doesn't go anywhere, doesn't do anything. It's
Right, so the value may not come back.
It may not come back. You may totally tank on that. I bought one pack of those one time. It was a $400 pack, and it was football, and I got a Trey Lance card, right? And it was when he was a rookie. So it was let's wait and see. Well, now we've wait and saw, and now he's changed teams, and now he's the third string, and that card's not
This
going
is
anywhere.
this is for me becomes more of the issue than the cards getting more expensive, because for me this is where the game gets into gambling. And I have an 11 and 12-year-old, and they play video games, and they have loot boxes and stuff.
Yeah.
And my kids are very excited about it. We don't do it. We don't do it in our house. This is where I think gamers, players, parents need to be responsible. If there is behavior that you don't think is healthy in the market, don't do it. They're doing it because people buy it.
Right. And
So
let's be clear.
That's what happened with Magic 30, by the way.
Right. And not just Magic 30, but Commander Masters as well.
Yeah,
Those that
but-
didn't like it didn't buy it.
Correct.
You can still buy a lot of that product. The product has dropped in price on
That's
many
right.
platforms.
Yeah.
So we
for
just
that
need to
reason.
be responsible that when we see certain behaviors, one, businesses are going to try to make money.
Yeah.
But when they
Hopefully.
do things that get into that area of gambling, my view is that needs to be something which all packs are gambling. But when you pay $200 for one card, that's gone too far. That is not healthy, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so I just wouldn't buy that. I'd encourage
it's not
others
for your
to buy
average
it.
consumer. It is
Right.
gambling.
Yeah.
It's like buying a lottery ticket. Some people are into that, some aren't. You
Yeah.
need to be financially responsible about it and know whether you have that money.
Well, I'm saying it's unhealthy because children play this game. That's what
so-
I'm talking
so
about.
what I feel, children do play this game, but they're not the majority. That's not who this product is really marketed to.
I guess it
anymore.
depends on how you define children. When I go to the card shop that you go to a lot, there are some adults in there, but there are a lot of children. And I would define that by, if you're living on your own and you're married and you're supporting yourself, you're an adult. If you're not doing those things, you're still a child. And
A very broad definition of child.
So, and I mean that because they haven't lived the life where I don't think they're not going to be preyed upon by some of these businesses.
Well,
They
I
should
don't-
be
but
saving their money
You're
for
also
their
making
future.
a generalization. Some of those
100%.
some of those people that play at those shop that you're calling children make a lot of money. I talk to a lot of
Yeah.
those people, and they make good money, and they have the money to spare to do.
And they
this.
live on their own in their own home, and they have a car.
Some
and
of
they do-
them, or they're saving towards a home, and they're not putting too much of this. They're waiting,
If they're being responsible, that's great. But what I'm saying is this is getting into the realm of putting them in a dangerous spot where the temptation is harmful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and ultimately at the end of the day, it does come down to, this is a game. This is something that I think it's not really meant to, which is where the difference is for sports trading cards for me. It's not really meant to just hold on and invest. Like you had mentioned before, you like buying new cards and putting them in decks and building decks around them.
Right.
This is technically a game. These are supposed to be played. Like these cards are supposed to be used and put in decks, and you're supposed to do things with them. It's not.
Do you think Posty plays with the One Ring?
I guarantee you, he probably
Doesn't he wear it around
Yeah,
his
I think
neck,
he wears
actually?
it around his neck.
Well,
like
if
a
it's around
necklace.
his neck, he must not be playing.
But my point,
No,
that,
100%.
But that is, and I think that's the difference, is they intentionally did that because they wanted that to be a collector's card, right? They created that one of one, the One Ring, to make it a collector's card. When they originally created Black Lotus, it was not a collector's card. It was just a card that people played with, and then it became a collector's because they never reprinted it, and it's now. And it's
What are
now
you saying,
banned.
Duncan?
I have never seen a serialized card played, any of them. And some of them aren't worth that much, but I've never seen. Have either of you? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some, but again, it's yeah, like you're saying, it's very rare because the fact that they're serialized automatically in most people's heads, this could gain value one day. Like this could be.
And I have no problem with
So-
collector's boosters. I have no problem with serialized cards. Magic 30 was getting. I don't even have a problem with the set you were talking about. Commander Masters, was it?
Yeah.
But Magic 30 is where it got to a level where I was like, it creates a desire for the card where I could see, my children wanting to go, hey, I want to go get this. And I just think, everybody make their own decisions. If people want to do that, it's fine. I'm just telling you the way I feel, that I have a responsibility not to buy those things. And trust me, there's a pull on me to go, I could do it if I wanted. I could go buy those packs. I could go buy that stuff. But then what am I not investing in my life?
Right.
Because I got 11 and 12-year-old that like to go to college someday.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. That's just my opinion. I want to watch out for when the gambling gets too extreme. And I think Magic has been pretty careful with that. Like, they made a mistake with The Walking Dead. Remember the Secret Lair?
Yeah, where they only released those cards.
And on top of that, it didn't go to certain areas. Like, certain areas couldn't get it. And that was shipping and rules and laws and all of that. But they responded to the community, right? They haven't really done that again. And I respect that. I give that a little respect.
no. So I think the general gist we're getting here is there are going to be moments where Magic gets too expensive. Don't play it.
Right.
Don't play those cards. Don't feed into that. There's plenty of other cards still. Just play with what you have.
That's
play
right.
with what's already out there. You don't have to have the hottest, newest thing if you can't afford it. Know what you can afford.
Yeah.
Don't gamble your money if you're not. And don't buy some of these products like Magic 30 unless you really want to view it as gambling, because you could open a pack of Magic 30 and get value, and you could open a pack and not.
Yeah. If you don't have money, you have a printer, just print the card.
I don't
have
think
that
Magic
ability.
would not like us saying that.
I
but-
don't care.
But I'm
you
just,
can proxy cards.
you can proxy.
Yeah. And if you
We'll leave it at that. There are multiple ways to proxy. Some are more frowned
Yeah.
upon than others, and we'll just
trust
leave it
me,
at that.
I buy enough cards that if people don't have money and they need to proxy them, because I've said already, I loan out my decks. I got young people come over to my house all the time and play with my kids at the dining room table. They're not having to spend all their money.
Yeah.
They're using my cards. And then sometimes I'm giving them cards, because that's another thing that's important with this. Magic getting more expensive. You want to get new players into it, we should be investing in the new players.
Yeah.
Giving them starter decks, giving them things, having events for them.
Well, and that's something that I think a lot of veteran players are very good at. There's some that don't maybe participate, or maybe some are bad at it and they do the pub stomping and pull out the CEDH deck against precons, whatnot. But there's a lot of players that are like, hey, I saw you playing that deck. I think those would go good in there. Why don't you just take these?
100%.
Making a trade that may be suboptimal for them, but they're just trying to get the cards in that player's
And Duncan,
hand.
you do that a lot. So I see you model that a lot, which is
Well,
really cool.
I do try and do that. And the funny thing is, I play with another play group that's considered more quote unquote dirty Magic, right? They play more cards, a lot of stacks.
Just so
right?
you know what that means, it's not the joking they're doing, although that might happen too. It's really the land destruction, stacks, things like that.
Stacks.
The cards.
I mean, we're not CEDH. We do have some decks that are that, but it's the higher level, the more kind of intense back and forth, the kind of naughtier play styles. But those players, you would be shocked at the value of cards that they have given new players. I mean, honestly, they will just hand out $50 cards because they think it would help the player out, a new player out. And I really respect them for that. But they do play that dirtier style, right? And that leads us into that next segment, which we call Counterspell, which is kind of more of a debate section where we talk about the frowned upon play styles or cards.
Yeah, the taboo of Magic the
Yes,
Gathering
the
play
dark
styles.
side.
The unwritten rules.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a couple that pretty much almost immediately comes to everybody's mind. We mentioned it in one of the previous podcasts with one of Jeff's decks.
I mean,
he doesn't.
it's also kind of funny seeing which of us are the offenders on each of these.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I've taken a look at this. Again, I feel slightly targeted because I'm pretty sure I've done almost all of these. So, but the biggest one that everyone says is an absolute, please, for the love of God, do not do it. Mass land destruction.
The important word there is mass, by the way.
Right.
Yeah. So I will say there are some decks. Like I did build one deck at one point in time that was targeted land destruction. It's a dragon. Whenever he attacks, you can pay 2 and destroy target land. Even that, a lot of people were like,
Well,
please stop playing
That's
that.
mass land destruction.
Well, the thing was, though, I was generally only using it to take care of lands that were extreme issues, like a Gaia's Cradle, or lands like Cabal's Coffer, which produces way more mana than what it
But because
should.
you keep doing it,
Correct.
you're inevitably going to target things that are not a problem, as
Sure.
opposed to like playing. So now I'm
Wastelands.
having wastelands,
which you tap it, sacrifice
mine.
it, strip mine.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking about.
But there's Armageddon is the most notorious card when you say mass land destruction. Everyone thinks of it's a white sorcery, I believe it's 2 generic and a white, and destroy all lands in play. It's just straight up. Everyone, we're gonna reset the land count.
Which you can be argued is fair on one side because your lands are getting destroyed too, ideally. But
I don't know if it's fair, but I wanted to own one.
Yeah.
So in order to own one, I have to put it in a deck. So I figured pull it in and call ya. At least when I do it, the game's over.
Yeah.
So it's
you
less
hope.
painful.
You hope.
Well, I won't do it unless it. I mean,
There
although someone
can
can
be
respawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea is that I'm trying to end the game.
Right.
So that's a big one. This next one, I'm pretty sure is the one that I'm most notorious for doing, which is Infect. So for all you new players out there, Infect is a sub mechanic of whenever you're dealing damage to somebody, you then deal Infect to them, which is a counter. And then once someone has 10 Infect counters, regardless of their life total, regardless of anything else going on in the world, they automatically lose the game.
Well, unless they have a card that says they can't lose a game or certain other things. But
So
for
the
most
funny
part-
thing is, he's the one who uses Infect, and I play Atraxa.
Right, and I don't play Atraxa as Infect. That's not it. And the reason why I kind of get away with it in a sense, quote unquote, is technically it's a Death Touch tribal deck. But the helm of that deck, the commander says creatures you control that have Death Touch, whenever they deal combat damage to a player, they give them 2 Infect. So technically, it is a Death Touch deck that also does Infect, but it is one of those mechanics. Again, a lot of people don't like it. They're very negative about it because of the fact that it doesn't use the life totals. Infect is something you can't really interact with that well or easily. It's very hard to interact with in regards to once you have Infect, you can't really get rid of it. It's
But
something that always
none of us are
sits.
bothered by playing his Infect deck because it goes
Yeah.
back to that rule we talked about in the last episode, which is there's an optimal way you can do that,
Yeah.
and there's a way you could play Infect where it's not going to bother people, and that's in a lower powered deck.
Yeah.
And so his deck, he didn't choose Atraxa Infect.
Right. Yeah. No.
He chose, I forget what the guy's name is. Do you remember what his name is?
Yeah. He is.
He'll look it up.
Yeah. I'm
but
gonna look it up for you. Real
it's
quick.
a lower powered deck,
and it's
so-
mono green, so I don't even get the
Oh,
advantage
Finn
of
the
black.
Fangbearer.
Finn
Yeah,
the Fangbearer.
that's it.
I think he's 1 green or 2 generic.
I think he's
green.
2 and a green.
And
Two-
don't get
two
me
and a
wrong,
green.
it's a good deck.
Yeah,
it's just not
It's one of those
it's
decks.
fair.
I saw it and I was like, I thought it was kind of a cool idea of them giving you infect without actually building infect. And I thought, hey, why not build a Death Touch tribal deck? And all the creatures in there are super low to the ground, like 1 or 2 CMC, converted mana cost. And so it's really quick. It's really fun. But, you know, it 100% relies around the commander. So if you just keep eliminating my commander, I'm never going to do infect to you.
Well,
but
it is such a controversial but neat effect that they
Yeah.
did try and kind of fix it when they came out with Toxic, right?
Correct.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but the thing about Toxic is it was like, oh, they only have Toxic 1, so even though they're doing 4 damage, you only get 1 infect instead of 4.
Right, 'cause
That's more fair, but it's much more lower powered, and I think most people have decided it's
Because
for the most
technically,
part, not
that's the
worth
other.
the
I guess
effort.
the other important part to mention is a creature that has infect. You get infect equal to the amount of damage it does to you with most infect creatures, which is why that toxic was a good intention of solving that, was because a lot of people would do this creature swing at you. It's a 1/1 with infect. I'm going to boost them up and make them a 10/10. Now you lose the game automatically.
or just throw out a Blight Steel and it does instantly,
yeah,
11
instantly.
infect.
Yep.
Which when we get in these infect discussions, I think it's more the deck is built completely around infect.
Right.
Because
Right.
I'm not upset if you happen to sneak attack a Blightsteel Colossus and like, oh, good job, well done.
Yeah.
You have 1 in your deck. You don't have 5 tutors to go get it. You just sometimes you get to do that.
Right.
Great, fun.
Right.
You did it.
But
All
when,
right,
like
next
you're
game.
saying, the whole entire deck is just it's
Yeah.
always infect and it's
And
at everything.
And not populate, proliferate.
Proliferate, yeah.
Which is why I took almost all the infect out of Atraxa.
Yeah.
Because it was like, it's a Planeswalker deck. I don't need it. It's not that much fun for people.
Yeah.
I'll just take it out. Plus, it makes you a target. So I don't even know if it's optimal to do it.
Yeah.
You know, Atraxa is a deck that has gotten a bad reputation because there are people that play it infect. Some people are like, I don't want to play against Atraxa. So let's talk about the cards that like you don't want to face, or you know certain people don't want to face, or general public says I don't want to face that card,
Right.
that commander.
Sure.
That you know, one of the ones I can't stand coming onto the battlefield is Oko.
Oh gosh,
If
yeah.
you can't counter it, something's
You've
getting turned
hated
into an
Oko since the very beginning.
Oh.
I
the
think the
worst.
reason
I
why
am the
there's
one
so
targeted
much,
here.
Yeah,
I
well,
must have it
listen,
in like 4 decks.
it's such a silly card because its plus ability is there's like no. It's just too strong. Like its plus ability is way too strong. It should not be a plus ability. It should absolutely be a negative ability. And so it's so silly how they're like, yeah, this is okay, especially in green blue, which already has a bunch of targeted removal. Let's just give it one more targeted
But
removal.
I'm wondering if any of the audience can think about why a blue player might not like that particular card.
Yeah, because no one likes it.
No, it's because play more creatures.
right.
If you have creatures, Oko's not a problem because you're going to get to do one thing and then it's dead. But if you don't have creatures, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna just keep going
Also,
and keep
People
peeing
don't
off.
attack planeswalkers enough. Just kill the planeswalker.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, if you're playing against
like,
Jeff's Attracted
that
deck,
is
kill the
that is kind of
planeswalkers.
telling that my first thing was, well, if you can't counter it,
Right, exactly.
it's a problem.
Exactly.
Well,
Well,
I think that's a good rule of thumb. If you can't counter it, it's a problem.
so I when Duncan sent me this list, I immediately thought of a card which I also built a deck around. So there is mass land destruction, and then there is mass everything destruction. And I built a deck around this. There's 2 cards in particular that do this. And I played this deck one time, and Jeff literally looked at me and said, never pull that deck out again and ever play it again
No,
with me.
I think actually what I told you was I was winning and we had to go. We didn't have a lot of time left. But you couldn't win with that card, but you could reset the game.
Yep.
Which would then give you a chance. And I literally just said, don't you do it. Don't
So
do it.
It was so there's the 2 cards that would do it. There's World Slayer. It's a 5-cost artifact, equip 5, and what it says is whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy all permanents other than World Slayer. So this is creatures, artifacts, lands, enchantments, everything that's out goes bye-bye. And then there's a creature, Bearer of the Heavens. He's a red creature that says, at the end of turn, destroy all permanents. So these 2 cards I had in this deck, and the guy I had him with, he's a red, white, black creature, and he has to attack each combat, but on your turn, he had indestructible. So what I would do was I would equip World Slayer to him. I would swing and hit somebody. Everything would die except for him and the World Slayer. And every single turn is keep hitting people. So anything they put out.
Which I have no problem with that.
So
the problem is when that guy's not out
yeah.
and you can't win and you're just resetting the game. Like that's where you're just like,
so,
don't do it.
But yeah, so cards that reset the entire game by literally either wiping everything out or shuffling everything back into players' decks is another one that a lot of people are like, as Jeff said, please, for the love of God, do not play that card and do that. Please. Like, I want to get out of this.
And then I think Duncan is referencing some other cards where you see commanders come down.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, don't worry. I built this suboptimally. And you're like, impossible.
Yeah, Urza comes to mind.
Yeah.
Urza,
Yeah.
High Lord
High
Artificer.
Lord
And
Artificer.
I tried to build benign Urza. Just the worst artifacts you can imagine.
Yeah.
You know, the stuff that nobody wants to play.
Yeah.
Just to power. It still is gross.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are certain cards that do that. And again, I think that is something where when you're being forthright with the play table and saying, hey guys, listen, this deck does this. Is this going to be a problem, or are you guys going to let me play this? And if they're like, you know what, sure, go for it.
I think I would be fair. Like if they're like,
Yeah.
I'm playing Urza, I'd be like, they're like, it's suboptimal. I was like, great. Does it have artifacts? They're like, yes. I'm like, no,
No,
it's not suboptimal.
That's automatically
Put it away.
Yeah.
Get a different deck.
Yeah.
Well, I
absolutely.
mean, if they say it has 5 artifacts, okay.
Yeah. 5 artifacts. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a dozen
Maybe.
artifacts. Even
I still don't trust
even
them.
a dozen. I mean, in a 100-card deck, a dozen is.
Yeah. They have 5
You just have
artifacts and
trust
10
issues
tutors
at
to
this
go
point.
get those 5 artifacts.
Exactly. So yeah,
You're
I mean,
not tricking me.
yeah, exactly. So there are some commanders that are out there that kind of have the stigmatism, some other play styles and stuff. But yeah, these ones that we mentioned, these are a couple that are kind of just widely known of like, please don't do that.
And the funny thing is, we've all played them.
Yeah.
Oko is still commonly played. It's
He
not
is.
one of the taboos as far as nobody plays it. It's more personal. Another thing that's personal for quite a large amount of people, but I don't know any of those people personally, is Soul Ring.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that think Soul Ring should be banned.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually think, like, logically, they have a very sound argument.
Yeah. I mean,
It's fast mana.
yeah, it's always guaranteed. If you are building a commander deck and you do not have Soul Ring in it, you built your deck wrong. It pretty much comes down to
Yeah,
that.
like 99.9% of the time, that's true.
Yeah, like there's almost no reason ever to not have a Soul Ring and a Command Tower. I feel like are always the 2 cards. If you're building a commander deck, those are the 2 cards that are almost always automatically included. You don't even have 99 cards. You have 97 because those are always going to be 2 of them.
Duncan, what was your thought on that?
So I don't see the problem. There's tons of cards that if the player plays it on turn 1, they're going to get an advantage.
Yeah.
Mana Crypt is also 2 mana. It does have a downside, so people feel like it's a little more fair because you can
Right.
take damage. And
Yeah.
that has killed people, them taking that damage.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
You know, there's 0 cost rocks. There's Jeweled Lotus. It gives you 3
Ancient Tomb.
Ancient Tomb.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of cards that can give you an immediate advantage at the turn 1. But I feel like Soul Ring is just pointed at because it's so readily available. It's so cheap. My real feeling is it's because it's so cheap that people hate it so much because everybody can have it.
I actually think most of people, and I could be wrong, but most of the people I've heard argue against Soul Ring, their argument isn't Soul Ring alone. It's fast mana in general. So those same people would also say they don't want Ancient Tomb, they don't want Mana Crypt, they don't want those cards. And if that's your argument, it's a solid, sound argument. And roll 0 that conversation. Find a group of friends that agree with you. Maybe not everybody agrees, but they'll agree to make a deck without fast mana. And every once in a while, you can play a deck, you know, that doesn't have fast mana in it, and everybody's on the same level playing field. But if your argument is just no Soul Ring, that seems silly to me.
And I think, and this is one of those classic cases of where Magic created something in its early years and didn't realize what it was going to become. The no drawback, I think, is the biggest issue people have with it. Because even Ancient Tomb, for example, yeah, it taps for 2, but it's dealing you damage. City of Brass taps for any color, but it's dealing you damage. Mana Crypt, you have a chance to take damage. So I think all these other versions, and what's the other one?
Chrome Mox, you
Chrome
have
Mox,
to
you have
exile
to-
a card.
you have to
Mox
sack so
Diamond,
many.
you have to discard a land.
Right,
So
and-
they have
and,
downsides. Whereas
Even the other one, the Mana Vault, where you have to pay to untap
Yes.
it. Like there's negatives to everything, and Soul Ring just doesn't have it. It's 100% positive with no negatives, and I think that also might be part of that argument of it's not fair. Like there's nothing bad about this card. It's only good,
Well,
and it
there-
seems
there
to
technically
take
is
away.
sort of something bad. It's colorless.
I don't consider that bad because
So it costs
goes in
one
every
less
deck,
than Arcane Signet, right?
right?
But it doesn't tap for color.
But the difference is it will always pay for commander tax.
yeah, no, I'm not saying it. Look,
Right?
I'm not going to sit here and argue it's not the best.
It's not-
I think in the last podcast, I literally said it's the best card in Magic.
yeah.
I would counter it if I had a chance. But at the same time, it's like it is Commander.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
get over it.
I'm okay with
Sometimes
it.
it's going to come out.
I
and
think
change
the
game.
fact that it's actually a monetarily accessible card. It's
Yeah.
easy. I think they're $1. You can go get one for. It's easy to accumulate 10 of them. It's not hard. So if it was like a $30 card or a $40 card, I would then kind of
I
understand
don't know,
the
Duncan.
argument.
What do you think about that?
So my argument is to me, it is what helps balance against green. Green has so much good
That's true.
ramp, right?
That's true.
This gives those other colors a way to kind of catch up to green.
Yeah, I mean the one.
And as the green player, if he has to choose between two cards, the final two cards put in his deck, and the deck is so good he only has two cards, right? And one is Kodama's Reach and one is Soul Ring. He's probably gonna take Kodama's Reach.
Well, you're not a green player.
You're a blue player.
No, you're absolutely going to
You
choose
still-
Soul Ring.
but
Yeah.
here-
I disagree. I have
because Soul
seen
Ring
people
will
play
help you
decks.
cast Kodama's Reach.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is
But
too,
if you have to choose between those two,
Yeah, I just take
I take it-
Cultivate and Soul Ring. And I leave out Kodama's Reach.
But I think the other thing too, like you just mentioned, green is one of those other colors that it's almost just naturally built around mana advantage, right? I mean, Llanowar Elves is the most notorious
Birds of Paradise.
Birds of
even
Paradise.
better.
One drop green. Birds of Paradise taps for any color. Llanowar Elves. One drop
But
green taps
summoning
for green.
sickness.
Sure, it has summoning sickness, but you are effectively now 1 mana ahead of the rest of the table
It's also
on turn one.
and
So
board wipes are so prevalent right now that like it's really tough to use mana dorks. I'd say even artifacts are hard, but
hard, yeah, they're
Getting-
not as hard as
getting back
creatures,
to
though.
it, someone plays a Soul Ring. The easiest fix is you just attack that player. Look, there's a board state.
Yeah.
If someone already jumped ahead 2 turns, which is what they did, they jumped ahead 2 turns, and you're going, I've got 3 damage. I don't know where to send it. Just send it to the Soul Ring.
Yep, there you go.
It's and that's why I think they've done things before where they've checked stats.
Yeah.
And like Soul Ring players don't win very often because you play it out. And what do? We attack you.
Yep,
You're
well,
the problem.
you're gonna get ahead of us.
Yeah.
So, but that kind of brings us to veteran tips for beginners. Threat assessment. So last week I talked about countering and timing. We mentioned the advantages of kind of understanding when timing is important on countering spells and not countering them, and how to effectively use your counters. And then this week I wanted to bring up threat assessment. So threat assessment is something that is, like Jeff just mentioned, it's a board state. So you look at the board and you say, all right, who is currently the threat in this moment on my turn, and what's going to happen in these next couple of turns. And so, for example, someone who, which there's always kind of a running joke about is, oh, turn 1, I'm going to drop a land, tap it for a Soul Ring, tap it for a Talisman, pass turn. Okay, that person now has 4 mana available. Going into turn 2, they're going to have 5 mana available. A lot of times that's going to cast your commander. Even a new one that came out, Jeweled Lotus, is a 0-drop, tap for any 3 of one color, use this mana only to cast your commander. But still, a 0-drop
Yeah.
with, if you have a turn 1 Soul Ring and you have a mono-colored and those Soul Ring and that, your commander's on turn 1.
Yeah. Hello,
Like,
Neheb.
yeah, or hello Urza.
Yeah.
Like it's gross. Like, right? So understanding what threat assessment is and understanding how to look at the table and see who the threat is something that as a beginner you may not understand and realize, again, kind of going back to what I mentioned in the previous podcast, because you don't understand what cards do. But also it's something that it's almost evolving every single time someone does something. It immediately switches, it changes. And so being able to look at the table and realize and say, all right, well, this person has this out, which could potentially be a combo piece. This person, it looks like they just have mana and maybe a mana. So it's something that's very important. And the better you get at it, and the better you start, again, understanding the cards in the game, you'll also be able to understand and identify what are potential issues.
But let's also define board state, because a lot of people think board state means what's out of play, and it's not.
Right.
If someone has 12 cards in hand, okay, that is part of what you need to make a decision on, because they have card advantage.
Right.
If you're playing a deck that uses a graveyard and they have 20 cards in their graveyard, that needs to come into play.
Right.
So board state isn't even just what's on the board necessarily. It's what those players have access to as of other resources.
Right.
Well, I would argue a further step to that is it also matters what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Somebody could have 12 cards in hand, but they're playing a bird deck like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
You got a bunch of one
now,
ones.
I am sure that there is a listener somewhere,
That's gonna
maybe
send
not
us a
to
bird
us,
deck
maybe to
list.
somebody of their podcast, but somewhere there's a player that has a bird deck that could just wreck us, right? But for the most part, bird decks aren't real scary.
Right.
So if they have a bird deck and they're just popping down 1/1, 1/2, 1/3
Richard
birds,
at MTG Goldfish. Yeah.
Yeah, and just so that's another thing that comes to the board state, understanding what that person's deck does. A lot of times that's evident of the commander. You know, a lot of times that's what you're building your commander deck around. Not always, though. Sometimes people are just using that commander to gain access to colors or certain combos that don't even require their commander. I know the most infamous combo right now that a lot of people bring up in CDH is Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation.
Oracle, yeah.
Yeah, Thassa's Oracle, and it's pretty much the instant win combo for anyone who's running blue-black. And there's a lot of people, like, for example, that will run Yuriko because she gets to reveal cards and put them in her hand, so she's basically a draw engine. Because it's blue-black, they'll throw that combo in there just so they can get to it quicker by hitting people with ninjas, and then they get to it, and then they drop it, and boom, game's
I
over.
think there's also something to be said, not just knowing what they're playing, but who they are.
Right.
What type of play style they are. So a good example is in our group, Sloan
Yeah.
is the one who typically I can't determine what he's going to do. So because I can't always determine what he is going to do, and because he doesn't do politics as much,
Right.
if I have a choice and I don't really, all the things are equal, I'm just gonna kill Sloan.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like that very much, but he doesn't do the politics thing where Duncan does. So there's some strategy, and even it might seem mean, right? So sometimes you don't do that just because you don't always want to target one person. But there's strategy in understanding someone's play style, what they might do. If there's someone who counters a lot of stuff and their shields are down, and you're like, well, I know next turn I need to do some stuff. I need to bring them to a healthy level because they're going to control the rest of the game.
Right.
Those are things you have to think about as even their just play style. Will I be able to interact with this person or not?
Yeah.
So I will interject that there
Yeah.
is one instance where it's okay to just attack that player all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And that is Andrew from the local shop. We do have a rule at the shop. You kill Andrew first. So
Right.
to our listeners, if you play against Andrew, kill Andrew first.
And at my house, they just say, you guys were there when even my own children were attacking me to kill me first. So, yeah, there are times you do that.
Yeah, and
If
I
someone's
think,
won 3 games in a row, it's
Yeah.
like, it doesn't
It's like,
matter what
okay,
you have. I'm just going to kill you.
yeah, you've won enough tonight. I'm going to kill you. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think, again, for myself, I'm more than happy to explain to players why things are an issue or a threat, and I'm even okay with what's called table talk, which is just openly discussing what's currently available and what everyone can see on the table.
Right.
And so, again, helping newer players and say, hey, just so you know, that piece that he has out right now, that's half of a combo. If he gets the other piece out, we all lose.
of course, then you have players like Jeff that use that against
Yeah,
somebody.
he's like,
he
no, don't
knows
worry
that they
about
don't
that.
have the combo.
Yeah.
But
So-
will still be telling the truth and say that is a problem.
Right. And so
Everybody else is always the problem.
that's right, Jeff. In your mind, that's 100% accurate. Well, that's my tip for you, the veteran tips for beginner players. And remember, threat assessment is important. And as you learn how to assess the entirety of the game, from the graveyard to what's in people's hands to what's on the battlefield, you'll get better and better of understanding what the proper threat is and, hey, how to use those counters we talked
And
about
we'll
last
talk
week.
about that more in the future too.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's a pretty in-depth.
It's a
thing
fun
to discuss.
conversation to have too, for sure.
So I think that's going to bring us to the close for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for hearing us out.
And before we go, can we say a thank you to Jack May, too, who is editing all this for us and setting all this up and doing a lot of work on that.
Yeah, really.
So we appreciate it,
props.
Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Much appreciated, Jack.
And remember, everybody, kill Andrew first.
That's right. Thank you.